So it's been a long while actually since I've done a tier list. So today I figured I'd start them for 10.0.7. We had the update 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to wait a little bit to see how things kind of fit into the meta, how things kind of settled down. And I think we've waited long enough now, and I have a bit of a grasp of what's going on to give you guys an updated tier list for 10.0.7. We're gonna start with tanks today, and we'll go over the rest of them later on this week. Try to post a video each day if I can. But for today, we're going to start with tanks in both Raid and Mythic Plus. And of course, if you like the content, hit the sub button, drop a like, drop a comment. Double check that you're subbed if you watch my videos. Sometimes YouTube recommends them to you, and you're not subbed, but hit the sub button if you like it. So tanks. So I've gone through, and instead of putting letter ranks, which realistically are really vague and only mean a lot of things, I've kind of broken them down into different scenarios or different kind of how strong they are. So WoW as a game is very niche based. So what I mean by that is that if a person or a class or spec is good at one damage type, that would be a niche, like burst cleave, single target, things like that. For tanks, they do have damage potential, but it's also very good for them to be strong in a utility sense as well as a survivability sense. So we're gonna go through, rank them on survivability, durability, damage, and utility, because those are kind of the tank roles. We'll put a bit more emphasis on tankiness, damage, all that stuff. Than we will for later on, DPS and healers and all that. But in general, all tanks are playable in every content. You can clear anything you want with all these things. Some of them will just be easier to perform better on, or you'll see them push higher or clear things faster, yada, yada, yada. So without further ado, we'll go right into Mythic Plus first. And Mythic Plus, we're going to start off with the best tank in the game for Mythic Plus right now, and that is going to be Prop Paladin. Prop Paladin is really, really crazy. In 10.0.7, they got a rework in their tree. They got stuff added, like the thing in the bottom right of the class tree that extends their Sentinel uptime. They got greater cooldown reduction on their big defensives like Sentinel, Guardian Ancient Kings, Divine Shield, all that stuff. They got access to a shorter cooldown on Eye of Tyr that does good damage now. They got access to Divine Toll in their class tree, which is really powerful, frees up some points in their spec tree. So Prop Paladin has the most damage as a tank in the game. It has really good off-healing capabilities. There are keys. There's clips of MDI this last weekend where you just didn't run a healer, you ran a Prop Paladin. They're very, very strong. They have a ton of damage, a ton of utility. You can really carry a key on a Prop Paladin. Their shields interrupt, which is crazy. Divine Toll is like a 1-minute AoE silence that deals a ton of damage. They're survivable, they do so much damage, tons of utility. Prop Paladins really can do it all. They're very strong in almost every situation. They have very few weaknesses, so they belong up in that top tier. Moving down to strong in many situations, but has some distinct weaknesses. Put up Prot Warrior. Now, Prot Warrior is still kind of the king of everything. It's not as strong now as Prot Paladin. Basically, Prot Warrior up until 10.0.7 was just the best tank. It was very survivable, had a ton of damage, and it still does do all those things. It had a strong utility, it has an AoE stun, it has Warrior buff if you need it, it has the health shield shout. That's all very strong and very good. But some slight nerfs, as well as just how absolutely crazy Prop Paladin is right now, has kind of knocked it down into this lower tier, where it's strong in many situations, but it has some weaknesses, and that weakness is just not being Prop Paladin, I guess. Prop Paladin is just really, really insane. It's crazy. Prot Warrior might see a little bit of an issue with defensiveness or offensiveness or like self-survivability, but they're very, very strong tanks. They can do everything. It's just Prop Paladin is absolutely insane. Up with Prot Warrior here, I'm going to put Brewmaster. Brewmaster falls into a similar situation where they're very, very strong in terms of damage, but they're a little squishy, so that's kind of their weakness. They do bring really good utility. Ring is very useful, Leg Sweep, Para, Interrupt, Monk buff, and then they also have the two other buffs, the Leech one and the Avoidance one, or the Healing one, I guess. So those are very strong. They do a lot of damage as well, which is very, very powerful. They're just not as survivable as maybe the other two options in this top tier. Now, that's not saying they're bad. They are very, very good. You can see Prop Paladin just Brewmaster Monk kind of just absolutely being an insane tank, doing really, really well. But in good play with extremely well gear and stuff like that, they can perform very, very well. Next up, we're going to put Vengeance Demon Hunter in the strong scenario. So it's strong in its niche. Its niche is very, very solid damage. and very, very solid survivability. But and you go up into higher keys and things like that, it does start to fall off a little bit. Its utility in Silent Sigil is very unique, but its other utility is cannibalized a bit by just kind of how strong Havoc Demon Hunter is, which does kind of eat into its niche a little bit. Their damage is very strong, but they're definitely not as strong as the tanks above it. So we'll put it down into this tier here, ranking it a little bit lower than the other two above it. I believe Blood also falls into that tier. Blood is strong, it's very powerful, but it does also fall off in higher keys again, like Vengeance does. Its survivability is very sketchy in larger pulls. It can just get globaled, which is probably Blood's biggest weakness. Blood Death Knight, you know, has strong survivability, it has strong all that things, but if the mobs on like a fortified week, for instance, are just hitting you so hard that you can go from 100 to 0 in a few hits, in a few globals or like less than a global, then Blood is going to fall off very, very hard. Their damage is also much lower than other tanks. Their damage is not anything crazy, but they have really good mob control, which is probably a really, really useful thing, and does give them into a very strong niche. But in general, when compared to those other tanks in Mythic Plus, they're just not as powerful. Finally, we're going to round it off with Bear. Now, Bear has a niche, and that niche is kind of just very, very, very powerful offensively and off healing. But they're so squishy, especially with how bugged Tooth and Claw is right now. Tooth and Claw, for those of you who don't know, basically makes your Maul and Raise have the target deal less damage to you, which is one of their kind of main mitigation. And plus, it's bugged, doesn't work with magic damage. So bears are just kind of getting hit by magic and falling over, which is never good. So in like those higher keys, bears can't really survive very well. But they have tons of damage, tons of off healing from after the wildfire. So they are very good in that kind of damage off healing niche. But if you do have a bear druid, you should be a little bit concerned about the survivability as you go into larger pulls, higher keys and stuff. Things will just start to hit harder and will pose a risk to their life. This is kind of how things are going for tanks in Mythic Plus right now. Prot Paladin is just so strong in all scenarios. Prot Warrior and Brewmaster are very strong in most situations as well. They do have some weaknesses, as I said. Blood and Vengeance are strong. They're a bit more niche, a bit worse in higher keys. And Bear, very strong damage, very strong off healing, but they do kind of just tend to fall over when hit by enemies. So that's kind of a downside to them. So with that, we're going to move on to our raid rankings now for the tanks. So moving on to raid now, again, everything can be played in every situation, every scenario, whatever. This is just going to be kind of how they're ranking against each other in their niches in Vault of the Incarnates. So we're going to start off with Blood Death Knight. Now Blood I'm going to put up in, it does belong up in the strongest tier, but it does have some weaknesses, so I'll put it down below. Blood's weakness really is their mobility. Now, this is weird because it's also their strength. So Blood is not very mobile. It is their weakness. However, Dex Advance is very, very powerful on the 3 hardest bosses in this raid. Well, 2 of the hardest bosses, and then Death Knight's other strong thing, basically their magic immunity and anti-magic shell, is also incredibly powerful. So while I do think that Blood is very strong, they're very survivable. They don't have a lot of damage. Their damage is a little lower, but they're very, very survivable in many situations. And you kind of need them on the last few fights. A Blood Death Knight can tank Diurna solo because you can anti-magic shell, Mortal Stone Slam on Mythic, which is very, very good. And then Death Advance against Hurricane Wing. It's really good quality of life, means the boss doesn't really move around during that, which is very, very big and important for progressing P1, which is one of the hardest phases of that boss. And then again, things on Dathia with Zephyr Slam and Blowback, you can kind of have just ignoring all the kind of harder mechanics on Dathia as a tank. So they're very strong in those scenarios. They're very, very survivable, but they do have a weakness in terms of damage. So I'm kind of torn between this top tier and this bottom tier. Because of how good they are on the, you know, last 3 bosses, basically, I do want to put them up in strong in most situations, but they do have that marked weakness of single target damage, which makes me kind of err a bit down here. Now, either way, wherever I put this, know that Blood is very, very powerful. Know they are very, very good. Blood Death Knight is very strong this tier, is very strong in this raid. So between these two, kind of torn a bit based on my ranking system. But we're going to leave it up in the bottom one here. But just know that Blood Death Knight is a very powerful and almost needed tank in the last few bosses. It just does have that single target damage weakness. Next up, Brewmaster. I'm going to put Brewmaster down here. Brewmaster's damage, again, is incredibly strong. Probably one of the best. They also bring Mystic Touch and a few other nice monk debuffs. However, Windwalker is powerful in this raid, and Brewmaster is very squishy. Brewmaster's strength is mobility, which can come in handy in lots of these tiers, but they are very squishy. Their damage is strong, but they can get kind of globaled, and have those self-healing, that survivability weaknesses. But in good gear, in great play, they can perform very well in this mobility niche. With damage, they're very, very strong, but they are a bit squishy. Next up, it's Bear. So Bear is weird. Bear is very strong and has really good damage, really good off healing, really good survivability. But when I say really good, I mean compared to like a DPS maybe. Their damage is good, their survivability is poor, their off healing is great, but they're kind of just outcompeted. A little bit of an ecology term there. They're outcompeted by every other tank in the game. They have that niche of strong damage and off healing, but everything else is just kind of fine. It's hard to describe them without using the word mid. The word mid just comes to mind. Again, in good gear, in a good player, they can perform very well and be a very big asset to your team, but they are, not really the best at anything, which just kind of dropped them down into this niche weakness tier where they're kind of okay at everything but not really good at anything. So that's going to kind of leave them down there. Next up, I am going to throw Prot Warrior up in strong in most situations. Prot Warrior, very good damage, insane survivability. Prot Warriors can really just tank a lot of things. They've received some small nerfs. However, I do think they're still one of the best tanks in the game. They bring a really good rallying cry, which is very useful for very useful for your raid. A little bit of words there. They can bring good damage in battle stance if they're not tanking or if there's lots of less damaging encounters. They have good mobility with charges and leaks and stuff like that. So Prot Warrior is very, very powerful. Very, very strong. It does have a little bit of a weakness in magic damage, but they have spell block, which kind of mitigates that. So all in all, Prot Warrior really is just strong in almost every situation. There's nothing really bad about it. If you want to pick a tank, Prot Warrior will be good in almost everything. You can do everything with Prot Warrior. It's very, very strong. Next up, we're going to be Prot Paladin. Now, Prot Paladin is going to be a very similar situation to Prot Warrior. Their damage and utility are absolutely insane. The damage is really, really high. It gets better in like an AoE scenario, so there is that to keep in mind. Their single target damage is still good though. They're very, very strong utility-wise though. Final Stand is very strong, Blessing of Spell Warding. They have Bop, they have Blessing of Protection, which I just said, Blessing of Sacrifice. They have really strong off healing. They have just a lot of like really flexible options in their talent tree for damage or different cooldowns in different scenarios, different survivability, stuff like that. So they're very, very powerful. They're strong in almost every situation. There's not really anything that ties them down. They have all the different auras that they don't need to kind of just be Devotion Aura like Holy is. So if you have one Paladin, they could be Devotion Aura, but if you already have a Holy Paladin, they can do the new Retribution Aura, which is a very strong aura if you're taking that damage. It depends on the fight, but on a lot of fights, you will have a really high uptime of that 30%. Decaying over 30 seconds. So Prot Paladin brings great utility. It's very powerful. It's a very, very good pick. It's probably one of the best tanks in the game, right? Finishing up is going to be Vengeance Demon Hunter. Now we're going to put Vengeance down in weaknesses, but a very strong niche. And it is like Brewmaster, where its niche is very, very strong mobility. It has really good utility in the terms of Still Silence, Chaos Nova, Chains, and Misery. So it's very good mob control. Probably the best of the tanks for raid. But in a lot of fights, you won't really need that. A Vengeance Demon Hunter can perform very well. Things like Raz platforms, things like Diurna, ad groups. The mob control you could get from those is very good. But they do have weaknesses in the form of kind of self-healing with the nerfs to the hunt. They could kind of get hit out of dangerous situations and not really have the mitigation or have the tools to survive that anymore. These situations are a little rarer, but those definitely can still happen. Likewise, their single target, which is a very important damage profile, is less than others. They're also very complex to play, which isn't really a bad thing for a lot of people, but it's not really a great pick up and play tank because of the frailty system and all that stuff. I do like Vengeance personally, really fun tank for me to play. And they're very good at mobility with solid damage, but because of their survivability weaknesses, as well as just the absolute strength of Havoc Demon Hunter cannibalizing into their Magic brand debuff. I don't think they're one of the best tanks. They're very fine, you can do everything with them, but I do think their weaknesses do kind of show up in those scenarios where you don't want them. So those are my tier rankings for Mythic Plus and Raid. Now again, just my opinion. I could very well be wrong. Let me know down in the comments if you think I'm wrong. Be nice about it. If you're rude to me, I will delete your comments. So boom, 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 1984. But with that, I will end this off today. Let me know down in the comments what you think, any suggestions, any improvements, all that stuff. And I'll catch you guys next time with the next tier list. Probably do healers next and then move on to the DPS. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. A big shout out to my YouTube channel members, Dam and Flapjack67. Your guys' support has really helped me make these videos as good as I can. If you're looking to support me and help me make more videos and better videos, then click the link in the description below to learn more about channel membership and get a ton of sweet perks while you help me make this channel as great as it can. Thank you.